Trauma. Everyone has it. No one talks about it. It seems easier to stay silent, ignore it, or stuff it than it does to honor it, learn from it, and finally heal. Trauma is debilitating, yet so often we suffer in silence. Trauma is not meant to be battled alone, and we are no longer going to suffer in silence. Together, we are creating a safe place to speak, to share our stories, and grow our strength as we heal. Together, we are giving a voice to those who have been silenced, bringing darkness into light, and letting God use our stories. Today, we find ourselves again. We relight our spark and let it light up the world. Stop SIS is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating on issues of trauma and trafficking, as well as the amazing power of the healing journey. Welcome to Stop SIS. All right, big welcome to the Stop Suffering in Silence podcast. My name is Denise Walsh, and as you see, we today have a guest. Our guest is the host of the Triumph Over Trauma podcast show, where everyday people share stories of overcoming adversity so we can all learn from one another. He suffered from major depressive disorder, and his mom had bipolar disorder. He also had a life-threatening blood clot in 2021. I'm very interested to hear about that. He is passionate about mental health and encouraging people to speak up and seek out help to live their best lives. So big Stop Sis welcome to Chris Gere.
Well, thank you, Denise. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's always fun hearing about yourself in the intro. But yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for inviting me on. I love what you are doing and the mission. So very, very happy to be here and be a part of the podcast today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. And I'm really curious to hear more about your story because there's a few things that stood out to me. Number one, your mom had a mental health diagnosis. And so I'm fascinated to hear a bit about what that was like growing up. And if you knew if she was managed or not. I think that's another one conversation. The other is how you identified and figured out what your struggle was, because I think that's a process in itself. But then also your life-threatening blood clots, and then now you have your own podcast. So we have a lot to get into today, but I'd love to first hear a bit more about your story and how you really kind of figured out that depression was something that you struggled with, and it was something to take seriously.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot there. And there's a reason I have a podcast, because I can talk, we all have our stories. We've all been through a lot and experienced a lot. So it's specifically about depression. So take you back to, it was 2016. And my wife and I had moved back to Florida. I'm originally from the Baltimore, Maryland area. I was born in Baltimore, from that area. And then we moved to Florida at one point, moved away, moved back. So we'd moved back, and I just was in a real funk. And I'll just say, I had gone back to a job that I'd done before, and it was around Thanksgiving of 2021. And I started crashing, and it's interesting. Social media definitely had a play in it. I had some kind of relationship jealousy stuff that was it was illogical, to be quite honest. But something triggered a crash in me. And when I say a crash, I suddenly was completely changed. And I mean, I could tell it wasn't just people say they're they feel depressed, and I was depressed. It was something I'd never experienced. What I mean by that, things I was, things such as going into my closet and locking and closing the door, turn the lights down, and laying on my back on the closet while it's the middle of the day and it's sunny. My family's out, Liz, Florida, sunshine, beautiful weather. Young kids are playing. Everything is good and happy, go lucky. I'm in the closet, literally complete different, crying my eyes out, for a long time. And things like that were happening. I just was constantly down. I lost interest in all the things that I like to do. I love basketball. I didn't want to play basketball anymore. That suddenly I didn't have the energy, the wherewithal to just drive down the street. So, I mean, there are tons of factors, but ultimately, I guess the high level is I just was struggling, suffering, crying all the time, lethargic, Just very, very dark, very bleak, and it was very, very sad.
So one question I have is
Yeah.
I was kind of expecting this to start in your teen years. Like I
Yeah.
always had up and down and all
Yeah.
these things. And no, it sounds like you were fairly, I mean, of course, I'm sure teenage hormones and all that kind of stuff, but you had maybe like a episode where all of a sudden
Boom.
things changed.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
it's interesting when something happens, it's almost like they do a crime scene investigation, right? The forensics. After I experienced that, as I've become more educated, I learned, going through this process of healing and the journey and education. I knew my mom had bipolar disorder. I learned that as I got into kind of the teenage years, and that's another conversation we can get into. But as I look back and reflect, I didn't know it at the time, but there was no diagnosis, but I truly believe when I look at the symptoms that all my life until that moment, I had dysmia, which is, as you know, a low grade depression. I think all of my life I was walking around carrying this unprocessed trauma, right? Unprocessed pain and suffering that was never dealt with, never discussed, never managed, never really addressed. And which, for a lot of reasons, I went through life for a lot of reasons due to abandonment issues and different things that happened. Kind of like guards up. I would not let people in, didn't trust people. Would say very little, would not really expose much out of fear that someone would hurt me. So I believe based on my energy levels and kind of the way I was on the outside, high performing in school, involved in athletics, very, doing all the things that looks like a very high performing kind of like, student, all those things. But I think as far as my communication, how I felt was always a slow grade. My wife always described me, and we met in ninth grade actually. So most of my life I was described and would agree was kind of stoic.
Okay.
It's almost like I could have won the lottery, or I could have just, someone close to me could have just died, and you would never know the difference. There was no processing or display of emotion.
Right.
I mean, it may be once in a while, but it's very, very rare.
Right.
So I believe that most of my life I had dysmia, and then this just was an incident that triggered like this complete, like, a whole different experience.
What's interesting is that oftentimes with trauma, it's like your house is on fire, and you're like, I'm fine, I'm fine. Until all of a sudden you're like, it's not
like Chris Farley.
Okay, so was there anything else in your life that you think maybe triggered the episode, or was it just the chronic stress your body and brain were under for all those years?
I think there were, it's hard for me to pinpoint one specific thing, but I think there were a combination of factors. I think one was job dissatisfaction. As a man, as the breadwinner, et cetera, like that's a really important role. And I've always been an achiever, right? So achievement and growth is very important. So I moved back and was in a job that was not challenging me. It was like, I was not using my abilities. It was some, so it was not a good fit for me. I was very unhappy with that. Number two, we chose, I think being isolation was also another factor. And it was isolation before I moved back. So as we moved back to Florida, my wife and the boys moved ahead of me so that kind of they could move together like during this when school started. So the way they moved back ahead of me to start the school year, and I came back maybe months later. So we were apart for the first time for months, and I was by myself in North Carolina in the house, and I'm used to like being around people, and I get my energy, as I've learned recently, even though I have always kind of had that trust issue. I'm an extrovert. I get my energy by being around people. So I think isolation also I remember feeling pretty down when they were gone for a while consistently. Trying to cope with that. So I think that, isolation, prolonged isolation, plus dissatisfaction with the job, plus just this unprocessed, incident kind of, part of my life, relationship kind of struggles that I went through from back when I was like literally 20 some years ago. I never dealt with it. There was some pain that I had that I never addressed. I always kind of like, just, I had a habit of kind of just skipping over. Right. So life happens, some kind of adversity happens. And instead of kind of like, managing it and having the sadness where I just would kind of jump over, kind of take a shortcut. And I always described this way. I always thought that all these things that happened to me in life, I always thought I was bulletproof. So I always thought I had this bulletproof vest on. So relationship, mom, all these things, divorce from parents, you name it, people going to jail, stuff like that. All these things I thought that just bounced off of me. The reality was it was all shrapnel, and I was carrying it with my whole life. And I think eventually like became too much. The body was like, okay, time to come out.
Yeah. Because you're right. Even if your body, I'm sure you guys have heard us talk about the body keeps the score, right? Your body knows. And so at some point it's going to pop up and say, okay, deal with me now. And so you have this major depressive episode. I'm sure you didn't quite understand it immediately. So how long did it go on before you finally said, all right, this isn't going to go away on its own and I need to get some help?
Yeah, it's hard for me to pin. It felt like forever, felt like eternity. I'm not really sure, to be quite honest. My brain was in such a funk. And so I don't know if it was a period of 2 weeks or 6 weeks, but I'm going to guess it was somewhere in this period of probably 3 to 6 weeks of me just like literally going through psychological hell. And I'm so grateful and thankful for my wife. Like I'm very surprised we're still together, because I was putting her through hell. I was, as I said, there was relationship trauma here. So I was like jealous and like this is stuff that happened 20 years ago, and I'm frustrated. It was very unfair. It's very stupid, when I look back at it.
Whether we like it or not, we take those emotional strings we haven't healed from our past into our future, right? So things that have happened to you may not have anything to do with her at all, but yet it's still impacting your relationship if those things aren't healed.
It did. And Denise, you're exactly right. It did. So I don't know, I'm gonna guess, let's just ballpark. It was probably 4 or 5 weeks, I'm gonna guess. So the way I describe it now, like I have a post on Instagram where I talk about like literally like in the details the way I felt. But I felt like it was like 24/7 pain. Like it was like feeling like I was being shot, stabbed, burned all at the same time, all day long. Like it was like torture. Like
physical pain.
Physical, emotional torture, and I couldn't escape it.
Yeah.
And which led to things like, suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, strictly because, and this is the first time I'd ever felt like that in my life. And I never understood, really understood why people would think about things like suicide. But I realized then it was, in my case, it was because the only time that the pain would go away is when I went to sleep. So logically I thought, if I just stop, if I stop being conscious, I won't hurt anymore. Like, just like you think about when you get, if you get an injury, you want like Tylenol, you want something to, you'll do whatever you need to get that pain relieved, because it hurts like hell. So sorry, that's more than you asked for as far as the time, but I'm guessing it was probably, let's just say a month, ballpark. But probably around that, probably around 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And so what was the rock bottom, or what made you say, all right, I got to go figure this out?
I can't put one particular thing, but I do know that I kept, so mentally for a long time, like I knew the options were there. I knew I could like get some kind of help, right? I knew that existed, but all the things that stereotypical reasons why people don't, that played in my head. One, I'm a man. Men don't need it. Like, I don't need help. That's gonna make me, I'm weak, right? If I get any help, I'm weak. Like, I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a provider. I'm successful. I'm college educated. I'm all these things. I'm all these labels in my mind, which like tell me, which means why would you need to get help from someone else? That means you're weak, which is complete garbage. But that was my thinking at the time, right? That was my that's how I framed it. So I was afraid of looking weak. I was afraid of the kind of stigma of like what people would think about me. I was, ashamed, embarrassed, all these things. Ultimately I was like, I can do this on my own. Like, I don't need anyone. It was almost like the typical American, Western, independent thinking. I got this. No, I don't need anybody. I'm good. I got it. Like, I don't need anybody. Yeah. See how that worked out. It did not work out well at all. Like, if your brain or whatever, you're just like, it's like saying, I got this if like you have cancer. Like, no, you need to get some kind of medical treatment. It's a medical issue. It's a health issue. So yeah, all of it, I think it just reached a point where I guess mentally, the cost of continuing the way I was living and how much it hurt me had exceeded the fear or the shame or whatever, of embarrassment or whatever. I was at a point where I was just like, I will do anything I need to try to fix this. And so I got to the point where I said, I called my employee assistance program, number one, and, for counseling. And also I set up an appointment with a psychiatrist. So to kind of go through that. My general doctor, I think, and a psychiatrist both. So yeah, it was just it became just too much to bear. And I finally kind of broke down.
Well, and one of the questions that we ask in mental health about, when we're kind of doing diagnostic stuff is how many areas of life is this impacting? And when it's impacting your work, are you able to function at work? Are you able to finish a project? Are you able to go to work? That kind of thing. Is it impacting your relationships? Is it impacting your eating? Is it impacting your sleep? And so when it's impacting basically every single area of your life, and I'm sure we can spend time justifying like, oh, I'll feel better tomorrow, or but eventually you go, I'm not feeling better on my own. And you're doing all the things you know to do and it's not working. You go, all right, I'm going to get some help. And so getting a counselor, going to the psychiatrist, what did you learn in those experiences?
Yeah, there's one other thing I just wanted to share too that just came to mind when you talked about kind of the like what the breaking point. So there was one point where I was at, as you said, it was impacting my work and relationships, impacting my everything. And there was one incident at work I could not, like I was going through periods where I felt like I was having a heart attack. I could feel my heart beating so hard. I was sitting in my computer at work in West Palm Beach, quiet area, and I can't even like write an email because my heart I feel it's going to jump on my chest. So I'd left from work, told my coworkers I wasn't feeling well, so I wasn't, and went to an urgent care or an ER or something. I think it was urgent care because I thought I was having a heart attack.
Wow.
And they did an EKG and, ended up all that stuff. And that was fine. So then later on, my doctor said probably was some kind of panic episode, coming up, some kind of thing like that. So that was one of the things I think that was leading up to me eventually getting help. But your question, you repeat the question? Sorry, I had to tell that detail.
Yeah, no, that's I think an important. What's fascinating too is sometimes if it's in our mind or emotions, we think we can handle it, but when it gets to our body, that's when it may be a bit easier to go to the doctor.
Yes.
So the question is when you went to counseling and the psychiatrist and things, what did you learn throughout those experiences?
Yeah. Oh, I learned a ton. One, it was my first time going through counseling. And for one, and I've heard other people share this thing, for those your listeners, for those who are listening, if you haven't been through counseling or just starting, right, realize it's, a good friend of mine who came on my podcast, put it this way. It's like going out to eat, right? You're not going to necessarily find your favorite place to eat the first time, right? You may have to go to a couple places to find the right fit. So counseling for me was like that. It wasn't like I had to go through several counselors to find the right fit for me. One of them said that I was a narcissist, which blew me away. And I was like, I was a broken man, or asked me that question. Another one just wasn't a good fit, just kind of personality. And then there was a third one who was a guy that I thought looked kind of spooky on his profile. But I ended up meeting this guy and he was exactly what I needed. He was amazing. So one was, obviously be persistent, right? And I know when you're not feeling well, when you're down, when you're suffering from something, it's hard to muster up the resources. It's hard to continue. It was hard for me to make the damn phone call or online. Like my brain was like, wasn't clear. Everything was very, the way to describe it is very cloudy, foggy, fuzzy. It's almost like there's a cloud in front of your consciousness. So it was hard to persevere, but it was important to find the right fit. So I have to say this, number one, don't give up on trying to find a counselor, if that's when you need and they're seeking. Number two, it was the first time I'd really, like, outside of speaking to my wife, talk to someone in great detail. Actually, I shared even more than probably even share with her, like in greater, like my whole life story. Like, I was talking through everything, and I didn't realize how much this stuff had hit me, it hurt me, and how much I was carrying with me. It was like there was so much baggage. It's like I had all these bags, weighing down this car, and that's why I wasn't getting anywhere. So it was the first time, and it was actually pretty powerful to be able to just sit with someone. And there's things I talked about that I was really embarrassed. I was afraid to talk about, uncomfortable, but there was something about the confidentiality and trusting someone that, like, I was able to put stuff out there I've never repeated to anyone. And I was carrying for, 30, so I was probably 36, 37 when this all happened. And it was beautiful. Like, there was something about speaking to someone who's trained and there's no judgment. Like, things that you could say things that you thought someone would be just like, come think the worst of you. And they just kind of listen to you. It was the best thing in the world. It was so freeing. It was so freeing. And based on your experience. So I'd say that the freedom, the comfort, right, that relationship was really beautiful. I got much more, than I ever realized. Those are the two big things that come to mind. And I'd say third is it's not right. You don't just go once and it just goes away. Like it's a process. It's a process. So just kind of stick with it. It wasn't like, okay, go to counseling for X sessions and, call me in the morning, you'll be done. Like it's work. Like even, over a period of, even when I got to a point where I was better, I still continued going because I still needed like just kind of stay on some things. Like, so it isn't just a panacea, like a quick fix. It's a process. It's work, right? But it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have two things to add. Number one, I think everybody needs to have a space to process life. Everyone, no matter whether you're currently going through a crisis or not, like we all need a place to go, ah! and it truly is surprisingly helpful because we think we're in our head. Even writing it down is helpful, but like so many things are just in our head. Why is speaking it out loud a helpful part of the process?
Yeah, there's something about, I've heard people talk about it, read about it. There's something about psychologically about, it's like you're physically releasing that energy when you're putting it out in the atmosphere. It's almost like as if you have some kind of virus, right? Say whatever you're struggling, imagine there's probably some like scientific thing behind it, right? But it's like, think if you had some kind of something stuck in your body and kind of, you're just like spitting it out. So you're literally spitting out whatever the pain is a problem, like you're getting out of your system. So it is a emotional, but also like a very real physical relief.
It is. It's so fascinating to me because you're right. It's not a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
There's onion layers. Life keeps happening. Like this is a process in order to be your best self. But when you speak it out loud, it impacts you on a cellular level and things do release and it's no longer trapped in your body. Plus, you're getting immediate feedback from somebody who can either help you to see it in a different way, offer a new perspective, because of course we're meaning-making machines. And so oftentimes it's the meaning behind the situation, not necessarily the situation that causes us so much stickiness. So we can work through some of that, but they can also teach us skills and teach us things that we haven't thought of. And then I just think you can tell I'm like, yes, I went into the right field because I still think it's so great. But the accountability of seeing someone either every week or every couple of weeks, and then having someone to check in with in terms of, are you utilizing the skills you're being taught, or how are things going? And let's try this and see if it works and that kind of thing.
I learned a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy was one thing. And I actually have a book back here in my bookcase, right? I got a kind of self-help book from Barnes & Noble about managing depression. And so I learned a lot about that, kind of reframing my thoughts. And it wasn't right. And just to be clear, what I was told and what I've read is like for depression, the most effective treatment is both, right, talk therapy or counseling and, medicine, right? Both those things. In my case, it was major depressive disorder and I needed both those things. So the talking was good, but the talking alone was not sufficient, not what I needed. So I also, another process, like something I learned a lot about was also the medicine. And I was one hurdle. So, depression happens, right? So, stimulus, right? Action or whatever thing happens. And it takes me a while to get the point so that I decided to take this course of action, right? That was like one hurdle. First hurdle was, I'm going to do anything about it. Okay. So I did that. The counseling, that was hard, but I started that and that helped me a little bit. And then another hurdle was, seeing the psychiatrists and, doing the questionnaires, the DSM, yada, yada, 9 or whatever it is, like, which basically says, yeah, you're really depressed and you need some help. And so another stigma, another huge hurdle for me to overcome. This one was even harder, was medicine. It was really, really hard for me to accept the fact that I needed medicine. And I fought that for a while. So even when I was doing counseling, I was fighting that for a while. And it got to the point where I need to try it. Like they're telling me this, I'm still not, like counseling was helping, but it was not enough. Mm-hmm. And I finally got to the point where I like agreed to try something after doing research. And like, it was really, I was really, again, all the same things, shame, embarrassment, self-image of weakness as a man, all these things. And so eventually get to a point where like, I decide to try it. And just like counseling, the first medicine wasn't the right fit. First medicine did not make me feel well. It made me feel real shaky. And I was not, I told my doctor right away, this is not working. Mm-hmm. They told me to stick with it. I said, I need something else. Mm-hmm. So, it took me a couple medicines to try out. Actually, it was the second one I tried, but the medicine really put me over. The counseling helped me process and talk and reframe and have strategies and new ways of thinking and, behavior changes, mindset changes. And the medicine, I think, is what really pushed me over the goal line as far as like getting to where I needed to be, like a stable place where I was not broken down, crying all the time, where I could function. No, that really helped me. I mean, there's obviously, there's byproducts of that. It was find the right levels. It did cause drowsiness, cause sleeping. It caused other issues. I'll be completely clear, but it's what I needed to manage the condition. And it's what helped me get through what I was going through. So I learned a lot about accepting help, still, learning that it's okay to get help when you need it as far as medicine as well. And kind of being persistent with that process too.
So when did the blood clots and other medical health issues come into play?
Yeah. So this stuff, the depression was all 2016, 2017 timeframe.
One question I have really quick is, how long would it before when you went to therapy and you started seeking help, would you say, oh my gosh, I feel so much better?
Good question.
I'm like, I want people to know, does this take a year to feel better, or did you feel better within a month? Like how long did they expect?
I'm going to say from when I started seeing the counselor and taking the medicine, like I'm going to say between those two things, it was I don't know, but I'm going to say it was less than a year. I'm going to say it was a period of like less than a year. I'll just frame it that way to like get to a point where I felt like functional, like not like fully healthy, but I felt like I'm not thinking about suicide anymore. I can do my job. I'm tired all the time. I'm sleeping a lot. I'm eating a lot. Like there's other things going on, but I'm not suffering from major depressive disorder in that same. I'm managing it. So I think it was a period of like, probably after I started the medicine, probably maybe a month or two, maybe after that, like when I felt like the major ills were resolved. But then looking forward, it was a process. So we ended up 2016, 2017, we ended up moving back. So we moved from North Carolina to Florida, back to North Carolina. So we moved. So it was when we were in Florida is when all this happened with depression. And to your point, having a counselor, someone to talk to, it's the whole, like, it takes a village thing. Like it's good to have people you can talk to just to bounce ideas off. So I had a lot of this whole thing going, like we wanted to move back to North Carolina. I wanted to for several reasons. And I was struggling with that decision. And actually it was my counselor helped me kind of like figure it out. Like talking to him, and he just looked at me and just said, listen, because I told him I was struggling with this. And my wife and I we're trying to figure out what's the right course of action. And he said, listen, and I still remember this to this day. He said, Chris, there's very, very few decisions in life that are irreversible. Like you've proven the ability to find a job and make money. Like if you're worst case, you could always move back again. Like there's very few things that are irreversible. Like don't be afraid to do something and make a mistake. And I carry that with me today. And that was great. It was just what I needed to hear. And I decided to move, and it was the right thing. So I continued. I was still taking the medication and seeing counseling when we moved back to North Carolina sometime in 2017. I guess that was around maybe August of 2017. Or was it May? Oh, these times. I think it was like August. Yeah, it was school. Yeah, it was August 2017. I did not continue counseling. I tried someone, didn't work well, but I felt like I was okay without the counseling at that point in time. But I continued taking the medicine, and it wasn't like a perfect fit. We struggled with the move. Like I still had ups and downs. It wasn't like suddenly you're in the clear. Like I still continued to struggle. I got to a good point kind of environmentally when I got to a different job that was a better fit for me. So I was doing really well probably for a year or so. And then COVID came and rocked my world. And I crashed. I crashed with depression with COVID, and I think really due to the isolation. As I said, as I tell people, I'm a super extrovert. Like I walk into a room, there's a bunch of people, like my brain's going off. You could drop me in the middle of a brand new country, and I'm going to make a ton of friends. I'm going to have the time of my life. Like I crave novelty. I crave new people, new experiences. I love this stuff, right? Routine and isolation are not good for me. Like they're not how I'm made, for, childhood reasons and who I am. So COVID rocked me. And then, so we're going forward to, 2021. So around that same time, so this was almost 2 years ago, May 2021, my mom, I get a call. My mom was supposed to come down to see us. She lived in Baltimore. In 2020, she had a heart attack and she had a triple bypass surgery, and she was lucky to be alive. And we think that, the bipolar disorder, this is a hypothesis, right? The feeling elevation of, the mania made her, the first one she had in 2020 actually made her feel so good that she didn't even need to go, like, she could have died because she prolonged the time until she went to the doctor. Like, so she had this triple bypass 2020, she's kind of going through recovery and through all that time during COVID, which is really hard. She's set to come see us, and we bought her a ticket to kind of come see us for the first time since COVID. And she's supposed to come down on Mother's Day 2 years ago. And I get a phone call from my sister, like the day before Mother's Day, that they found my mom dead in a motel. And she just, she was staying there because she was having some work done in the house. There was a flood or something with the water heater, and they just found her dead at 66. So that sucked. That hurt a lot.
Shock. Yeah. Shock to the system.
I'm sharing that because it's all around the same timing. So that was a big shock. It's hard. You lose people, but losing my mom was unlike anything we've experienced. So then within a period of that was May 2021, June, July, August, September time frame, I was out, and my son, older son, was running cross country at his school, and I was helping out. Parent volunteer. I was like standing in the course to kind of direct people where to go. Me and my younger son are there. We're kind of running the course like a little bit to get warmed up and get to where we need to get to go. And then the next day, the next morning, I wake up. I'm like, damn, my leg is killing me. I was like, I guess I'm getting old. I guess I was 38 when I was like, I guess I got to start stretching or something. I don't know I guess I'm getting old. So I just thought I pulled something, but it continues to get worse and worse. And my leg, starts getting bigger, and it gets really painful. It starts changing color. Like, it starts turning purple. And then it gets to the point where, like, it starts looking like, if you've watched like the Avengers, the Incredible Hulk, my leg, I've already have big calves, but it got like huge, and I could barely walk around. So it's getting worse. So I'm like, okay, I still thought I like injured something. It was something I did. And I went to, my wife was working at an orthopedics and sports medicine office. I got seen by an amazing provider there, and he looked at it, and he scanned everything, and he said, yep. He's like, you need to go to the ER stat, like right now, because it looks, it looks like I expect you have blood clots, and I expect you have this condition called factor V lead, which is some clotting disorder. He said, because you're big and you're white. He was like, that's just kind of the characteristics. You're white European people get it. So went to the ER and walking around for literally when I was going there to the doctor's office, I could barely walk. Like, I was dragging my leg around. When I went in, I told him, I said, I was half joking. I said, I want you to amputate it. Cause it was dead weight. I was dragging it. I could barely walk. So I'm walking around the ER for like 12 hours because it's COVID time and there's like isolation, and I'm like dragging around, like, I don't know, something off the TV, eventually they see me and they do scans, and I had, CT scans, different things. I had 3 blood clots in my right leg, like the calf area, like around the knee, and 2 in my lungs. So bilateral. So they call it deep vein thrombosis, or DVT, and pulmonary embolism, which is the lungs part. And that's the fear. The fear is that they break off from your leg, and it goes up the bloodstream to your lungs, and that can kill you. Like, I have friends call that the widowmaker. Like, that can kill you instantly. Like, no symptoms, nothing, boom, just like done. So I had those things going on, and I've heard people have died like in the waiting room. I told you, I was walking around for like 12 hours, like waiting just to get seen. So I'm very, very, very grateful. So all a lot. So you just asked when.
Did you have to be put on blood thinners, or how?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I take blood. I take my daily blood thinners. I'm happy to have my blood thinned, or, anticoagulants, whatever, after dinner, I have them every day. So yeah, that was so. Yeah, I think you just answered when, and you just got the whole.
That's all right.
Of what, how, why? I didn't get the why yet, but you got it all. But yeah, it was fall of 2021.
Okay.
Make a long story long.
Well, what I think is interesting is like the whole thing of life still happens, whether it's medical issues or moving or your mom. Like, life is still happening in the midst of having the depression, major depressive disorder. And so how did you cope throughout all of that? And how did you keep yourself in the game, because I think what can happen is people take themselves out of their own game, and then we can personalize life happening and say, well, maybe this means because I'm not good enough, or I'm bad, or I should just give up, or I shouldn't XYZ because this is, no, it's just life. Life happens to all of us.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean anything. It's just a part of the game. And so how did you navigate through that experience?
Yeah, it's something like thunderstorms, right? Thunderstorms just happen. Like no one did anything. It just happened. It's just the way nature and the way the organism of the world works. So, yeah, the depression part. I just kind of, I mean, that whole, I think in both cases, my whole navigation was like, how do I stop hurting? Like it was just focused. They say people are, the two main drives are either you're seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. So in both those cases, I was just trying to escape the pain. So, the mental health was agony, was seeking, how do I feel better? And then the leg, how do I feel better? So I don't think I felt some guilt with the mental health aspect. Just like it was, which was false. So I think that was kind of one thing kind of working against me. But I think it's mostly focus on just how do I freaking feel better was what drove me, was what kept my engine going. I tend to be kind of, at least in this stage in life, like optimist, glasses like overflowing full. So I think that, I think that's been a byproduct of all of these things that have happened. But I think what really powered me was just wanting to just feel better. Honestly, I think just how do I feel better?
Well, I think you've said two things. You said, how do I avoid pain, and how do I feel better? And what I've learned through the years, right, is if we focus on making the pain go away, it actually can get worse because we're focused on the pain. We're focused on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the opposite of that is, how can I feel joy today? How can I feel better today? What is one thing that I can do to move the needle today? And really focusing on that, because that will make that piece grow bigger.
I like that. It's almost like what you focus on, right? You get this more abundance. So if you're focusing on how do I get away from something that hurts me, like, oh, you're just gonna be thinking about hurt versus how do I feel better? Oh, I focus. Okay, we're gonna think about what things in the world, what can I do to it's gonna create good in my body and my mind.
And there's a balance with that, right? Because of yes, we want to process any trauma. We want to let things out. Like we don't, but we also, sometimes it just is what it is, and we don't need to process it to death. Like, why do I have this? I don't, we can stay there for years, and that's not necessarily helpful either. So,
you know what? I'm gonna add one more thing, Denise, and I just came to mind. I realized something that works in my favor. I'm not a real deep, introspective kind of philosophical person. Right? I just know that enough. I'm pretty much like I'm a very simple person. Like I'm kind of like a goldfish. If you ever watched Ted Lasso, right? The happiest. What's the happiest creature in the world? A goldfish, right? Because it's like it blinks and everything that happened before is gone. So, I think in some ways that's helped me, and that helps me to that's one of the things about my mind that's helped me cope. I didn't think too much about it. I think I'm very kind of like in the moment, like one half step. I'm thinking like one half step ahead at a time, which I think kind of helped me. I didn't reflect on it too much, which in other ways, right, probably hurt me because I didn't really process this stuff. So it's a balance, right, of coping mechanisms.
It's certainly a balance, but I think the goal is the counselor will support you in the processing piece.
Yes.
I like the idea of not overthinking or not over spiritualizing or not over personalizing life, because life sometimes just happens to all of us.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and you utilized your community, and found a new job, because you also said your environment shifted. You moved, you found a better job that you enjoyed more. Like, I think there's the holistic approach of depression too, which takes a look at all different aspects of your life and says, all right, well, what can I control? And I can get a new job that is within my control. And so doing things to fulfill your life in other ways as well.
Yes. And the job was a huge factor throughout my life as well. So, didn't really know what I wanted to do, coming out of college, found something, didn't like it, and then started a cycle of getting jobs that are, societally, they're good, they pay well, they're known, they're stable. I've got a family to feed. I'm getting all these external, right, reinforcement, but I started a cycle of trying to find something else that worked better, when deep inside of me, the issue was I never was really doing something that was truly me. So I've had up until about, honestly, till I started this most recent job, literally 1 year ago, I've had an identity crisis for most of my career, as far as I've been doing things that I've been good at, but I didn't felt like were the true me. And that's been another, contributing factor to depression and sadness and kind of lethargy, et cetera.
Not feeling in alignment.
Yes. And I've talked to other men who have like they've said like that has been the trigger for them. Like they felt the same way. It seems to be a common theme.
It reminds me of like, I just am making up this analogy, so
Yeah.
I'll have to process through it and make it better. But it's like having a nail in your arm.
Yeah.
Like the nail is your job or the environment, the relationship, whatever it is. That's like clearly the problem. But you leave it there and you try all these other things to feel better, when like really taking the nail out is,
You're so right. You're so right. It's just right in front of you. It's been underneath, the nail's been there the whole time, but I'm just, I couldn't figure out a way that I felt safe or felt okay to like take the nail out. Like I didn't, I was afraid, or I didn't know a good way to remove it.
Ooh, that's good too, because sometimes the inner strength needs to be built first. The healing needs to happen before you're ready to take the nail out. And once you take the nail out, meaning get another job, for some of the girls that we work with, it's leave the abusive relationship. It's the thing that clearly is the main problem, but you're not ready yet. And so the counseling can help you do that too.
I also, so I know you touched on that, and I obviously that's important for your listeners. And I did experience some of that as a child, right? As a I guess I was 17, 18-year-old, right? The experience of seeing my mom in a domestic violence situation as well. So I have got some of that as well, perspective.
Yeah. That's part of the baggage sometimes, that especially as a child, not given a chance to actually verbalize and talk about. You just kind of stuff it and move on. But
yep, you got it. Found other ways, right? And unhealthy coping mechanisms, without a doubt.
So then you started a podcast because you built so much inner strength. You were like, I have to tell the world. So tell us. So tell me, and it's part of the healing journey too. The more you speak, the less that stuff holds us captive. So tell me a bit about this experience with creating the podcast.
Oh man, it's been beautiful. And you can know from, your experience with what you're doing right here, right away. So I've always had an innate desire to help others. So my dad was a high school English teacher in Baltimore, and I really wanted to teach in going into college. I struggled with it, but I saw a struggle financially, and I decided not to, because I was afraid, right? Fear-driven decisions. I was afraid of being poor. I knew I wanted the family. I knew I wanted children. I saw a struggle, and I equated teaching with poverty and said, that's not the life for me. So that's part of that identity issue. Mm-hmm. Now, could be false, right? But that was my decision-making. So I'm framing that up because I've always had this desire to help people. Like I feel good. I took 1 year off of college to help my mom in that domestic violence situation. Had a guy evicted and prosecuted, and I used that year. Yeah, I used that year, and I worked at an elementary school working with a boy who was on the autism spectrum, and that was the most. And I throughout my whole career, right, that was a signal to me that I never acted on, but I always talked about that 1 year of working in elementary school was the most meaningful and best work I've ever done my whole life. And then a whole year I worked in, corporate America and doing things for, things that pay my family. But that whole 1 year was always the best year of work I've ever had. Right. And it was hard work. It was psychologically demanding, but so I've always wanted to help others. And then, these things happen, a few things happen. A significant part of this journey too. I also get to a point where sometime, I don't remember when this timing was, maybe it was after my mom died, sometime after that period in that year, I felt good enough that I was like, my goal had always been I want to, if able to, wean off of the medicine, the antidepressant, because it made me tired was a big reason why. And just mental, I was like, I think I wouldn't get to a point. So another factor is somewhere around this year, about a year ago, I worked with my doctor to safely, because in the past I tried doing it on my own. It was stupid. And I did it the wrong way. Right. I got burned by the fire and crashed. Don't do that. Not a good idea. So I weaned off the medicine slowly. So I came off the medicine. Antidepressant was one thing. And also, my mom had passed. I kind of reflected on it. And I also started a new job, which made me feel like, hey, I'm me. Like this is me. Like I am allow it to be my extroverted social self, and it's reinforced and rewarded. So all these kind of things kind of shook up. And what came out was this kind of like transformed, this almost like the butterfly metamorphosis from a caterpillar to butterfly. So it's like a new version of me emerges, which is a very open, trusting, kind of very like doing what I'm doing right now, telling you everything. Like I'm no longer playing Texas Hold'em in life. I'm more like I'm showing you all my cards, and even cards I have in my back pocket. I'm showing you everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm showing everything. And I just, I wanted to help others. And I just like, I don't know. I went to our county detention center one day because I wanted to help out and be like a mentor for people who were in jail. And they couldn't get me in that day. It's a process, of course. So I was sitting in the parking lot, and I'm like a kind of spontaneous, fun loving person. So I'm sitting in the parking lot, and for whatever reason, it just hits me. And I'm a person of faith. So in my interpretation is God was working through me as the Holy Spirit. And it's, I had this inspiration to why don't you just start a podcast? Just start talking. So I'm sitting in my car there, in this parking lot detention center. And I just Google how to start a podcast, and I just download an app, and I just start talking my nonsense, just literally just dumping my life story out of nowhere. So I don't know. That's just how it started. It started kind of with no plan, no real goals. It really was just, I decided to just start talking because I wanted to help people. You know what? There was one more part to that I missed. And that was, I talked to a friend, and he had pointed me towards Instagram because I was telling him I wanted to help people, motivate people, kind of help them. And he said, and I was not on social media at the time. I really haven't been on it. And he said, that's a good way you can reach people. He sees all the time. So I started with social media. That's how it got there. Excuse me. I forgot that detail. I started Instagram, and I became an Instagram crack addict, I'm gonna call it. And then I was like, I need to do something else. Let me find a better way to express myself. And that's how I led to the podcast. I was like, that's another way to express myself. So yeah, there was some build up to that. So yeah, it just started as a way, a vehicle for me to try to reach people and kind of inspire and educate and help other people, like a platform. So that's how it started.
Would you say that it's a part of your healing journey as well? Like, how has it helped you?
Hell yeah. Oh, every day. I'm so happy with it. It's an unright. I'm not making money off. I'm not in it for the money. I'm not making anything off it. I'm paying money to do some stuff, but I enjoy meeting, as I said, in meeting people. I'm a people person, but two, I am talking with people about their what we're talking about today, their suffering, their struggles, their pain, and how they've overcome them. And anytime we struggle with something, mental health is right in the mix of all of it, because we're dealing with that, how to work with that psychologically. And that is, my main goal is to encourage people to speak up and ask for help, and, seek out some kind of help that they need. And I love giving people a voice, kind of a platform to speak up. So this is me doing that. Like it's people showing how they've gotten help and modeling that for other people. So it heals me, and it gives me such joy because I'm seeing other people are hearing about it, which gives them like, hell, and I've had so many people come up to me, and like, it's like people know the real me now. You know what I mean? It's like we wear these masks, right, in different ways, these different masks. So I've had these people from childhood, people, my sons, parents from sports, things like, because I'm very open. I'll let you know my deal. It's like in my episodes where I talk about me at first. It started as me just talking about me, and it's grown into me bringing on guests. And it has definitely, it continues to heal me because it's a way to help me and help other people. And that brings me great joy.
Yeah. It feels good to be seen, known, and heard for your authentic self.
Hell to the yeah.
Yeah. And I think that in itself is like healing, and to be accepted for who you truly are, like chef's kiss, like that's what it's all about. And 100%. So the fact, it takes vulnerability to put yourself out there, right?
It does.
But with that vulnerability comes that personal acceptance. And then of course, the secondary acceptance of others, because the more honest you are, the more you believe in and trust and feel good about who you are. Because when you're not living an authentic life, you can tell. Nobody else might be able to tell, but you can tell. Yeah. And so the more authentic you are, I feel like the more inner strength you build. That's amazing.
Just be yourself. Like that's what I've learned. It's like, we get hung up on myself, people thinking that, what are they going to think about this? The reality is people think about us a whole lot less than we think they do. Like everyone's distracted as hell on their phones, their families, their jobs, and whatever someone else thinks really is none of your business, is that quote goes. So
I tell my sixth grader that I'm like, nobody is actually thinking about you.
No, they've got their own stuff. They've got their own stuff. We're all walking around like that. Go ahead.
As a final question, I'd love to hear if somebody out there is maybe in the midst of a major episode, or they've been having this low-grade depression for quite a while. What would be something that you would recommend to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, just ask yourself: is like, do you want to continue? Like, do you want to continue the way that this is going, right? And if the answer is yes, then you have your answer. Like, if it's working for you, and I ask that intentionally because, like, you have to, really confront the options. Options continue as is, right? That's an option. You can continue. It sucks. So if the answer is no, then do something about it. Do what, there is no one. I don't say every person has to go to therapy. Every person has to get medicine, right? Those things help me, right? And people find different ways of coping and getting through. But I would say definitely take action. Consider, talking to a counselor. What's the worst that can happen? You don't like it? I mean, like, at least try. Like when you're not doing well, like, get creative, try things. And if you don't have, if you're foggy and if you can't, like, do it processing yourself, because it's hard to just get out of bed or hard to just, like, find that one person who who will be your ally and just ask them to help you, just kind of shepherd you through whatever it is, the things you're just talking about, just literally just getting your thoughts out there help. So try things with counseling, your doctor, talking to your best friend, starting a class, like, try things out. Yeah. Find a way to use the resources that you have. Right. Because, through that process, like, whatever it is you're going through, I've learned this through the podcast, whatever the hell it is you're going through in life or will go through, doesn't matter what it is. You will get through it. You have stuff inside of your body and in your mind, as in the human resilience, you will get through whatever it is. You can.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. Rachel, as you guys noticed, isn't here. She's not feeling good today, but I know she would be certainly encouraged by your podcast and your message today. I think at the end of the day, you guys, that is always the question to ask. Where do I want to be in 1 year? And is this where I want to be? And if the answer is no, then you get to do something about it. Nobody is stuck. Even if right now feeling cloudy, you don't even see that there's another option. The reality is that there always are options. And so joining 90-Day U-Turn, connecting with the Stop SIS programs and the trauma book that Rachel just wrote. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to move the needle in your own life and keep yourself in your own game. And as Chris mentioned, whatever you're experiencing, you can and will survive, because I'm sure, just like your podcast is full of stories of people who have overcome craziness, right? I'm sure. And I think that all offers us hope that whatever we're experiencing, number one, we're not alone. And number two, we can and will get through it.
I couldn't say it better. Amen. Amen, Denise. I love it.
Well, I hope that we will have a chance to share. I know Rachel's interested in being on your show as well, so we'll definitely let our audience know when we're on your show. But thank you, Chris, for connecting with Stop Suffering in Silence today. Truly, healing happens when you speak in community, and you had the courage to get out of your own way and go seek help. And because of that, you're now impacting and having a ripple effect on everyone else around you. So thank you, guys. All the links to his podcast and all on Instagram and all of that will be below. Go check it out, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. See you. Thank you so much, Denise.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.